Daniel Levy is the president of the US Middle East Project. He joins me now live from London. Appreciate you being with us.
Good to be with you, Rosemary, and in a slightly more hopeful setting.
Yes, indeed. And of course, we have been seeing much celebration across the region after President Trump's announcement that Israel and Hamas have signed off on the first phase of his Gaza peace plan, which, of course, includes the release of all the hostages, the withdrawal of Israeli troops, and the release of Palestinian prisoners. What is your response to all of this?
Well, it's captured in how you just described that, Rosemary, the first phase. And let's step back a moment. Let's be very hopeful for the people in Gaza who have been put through an unrelenting killing spree of indiscriminate attacks, the cruelty of starvation, of everything being destroyed, displaced multiple times. The Israelis who are now waiting for their family members to come home, those being held, of course, Palestinians in Israeli prisons who will be released. And then one has to pause because we've been here before. Israel has violated these ceasefires in the past. And what has been agreed overnight was basically a leap of faith, which will at least include those first phases if they're implemented. But what you don't have is the clear arrangements for the entry of aid, massively ramped up scale into Gaza, for the full withdrawal of the Israeli military. And I think what we can anticipate is the next few days will remain optimistic, and then it will get difficult. And the trust Trump, how far will that currency go? Because that's pretty much all we've got. There has been a heavy lean in to get to this point. This isn't, and I think people are making a huge, in some cases, intentional, in some perhaps naive optimism, a huge leap to think this is a path to peace. The Israeli Prime Minister has said there will be no Palestinian state. He repeated it after the plan was presented. I expect him to repeat it in the coming hours and days as well. And as long as you have Palestinians in conditions of occupation and apartheid and under structural violence, and let's also keep one eye on the West Bank, where the relentless Israeli military operations are not going to abate, unless those things are addressed. This isn't the last time we'll be having depressing conversations, Rosemary, because no people kept under those conditions has security, and no people who imposes those conditions has security either.
Right. And of course, as you point out, despite all this excitement, sticking points remain, including the Palestinian statehood, which Israel's Prime Minister has rejected. And of course, the disarming of Hamas could prove complicated as well. What do you expect to happen with these two issues specifically?
So I think we've jumped too many steps ahead. I think if we get to the moment where the Israelis held get out, the Palestinian prisoners are released, and I think now the Hamas and Palestinian factions have relatively little leverage over which Palestinian prisoners are released. I would be surprised if the most heavyweight names are on that release list. Once one gets the aid and assistance in, I think whatever that initial line of Israeli withdrawal, and apparently it's not entirely closed, there might be a thick pen line on a map, but whatever that initial line of withdrawal is, I expect that to remain the line. So Israel will stay in Gaza. Netanyahu again has said as much. Therefore, you won't get Hamas disarmament. I don't think that demilitarization will happen either. I think Israel will find reasons to conduct smaller scale, but nonetheless ongoing military operations in Gaza. Can you at least prevent that from escalating? Then you have the whole question of governance in Gaza, where the plan basically talks about putting a colonial structure in place where there is not Palestinian governance, but rather you have this international board, the prime minister of the country I'm in, the former prime minister, Tony Blair, part of it. How on earth is this the right way forward? There might even be an attempt to impose a similar colonial structure alongside the Israeli occupation in the West Bank. And my prediction will be there will be no talks whatsoever on any serious level between Israelis and Palestinians with regard to a Palestinian state. That's not going to happen. And then there are other important questions, Rosemary. When there has been something, I think, legally defined in very important places, including the UN Commission of Inquiry, as a genocide, do we just say, oh, you stop now, that's fine? No, one has to talk about accountability. Netanyahu has an ICC arrest warrant against him. Who's going to pay to rebuild? Everyone assumes that the Gulf states should be lining up to write checks. Israel imposed this destruction. Is it going to be held account? Are its assets going to be gone after to pay for the rebuilding? So there are a lot of questions here. And I think what we will see is quite soon we're stuck, where the stuckness transitions into extreme violence again is going to be quite a big challenge. The Arab states who are mediating, I'm sure, are saying to Hamas, look, we're in very good standing with the American president now. He's made commitments he didn't make in the past. How long will those last is a very real question. And can you in any way tamper Israel's actions in the West Bank? And one of the things to look out for is, does Netanyahu hold his coalition together? If he holds his coalition together, then what is he giving Ben-Gvir and Smotrich over the coming days and weeks in order not to bolt the coalition? Again, that will be a huge challenge because their intentionality is, yes, we stay in Gaza. We're still going to try and displace Palestinians, and we're going to do our worst in the West Bank because if you also look at the conditions in which Palestinians are living, if you want to make life in any way livable again, rather than have a crisis where Israel is trying to push people out and the conditions exist for people to have a very hard time staying, then you really have to improve that situation. Are we going to be nickeled and dimed day in, day out when it comes to what is allowed into Gaza? I know that sounds like a terribly depressing menu. I don't want to take us out of this mindset of finally and relief, and that is absolutely the mindset for many Palestinians and Israelis today, but I don't want to make light of the hurdles ahead.
Daniel Levy, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your analysis.